Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining the Jefferson Educational Society's webinar, Erie's Diversity is the Path to Prosperity, Tackling the Teacher-to-Student Mismatch. I'm Angela Beaumont and I'm the Director of Operations at the Jefferson. Folks, as we begin today's event, I'd like to remind everyone tuning in that we are taking your questions via the Q&A function in this Zoom webinar. If you have a question, please share it there and we'll work our way through as many questions from you as we can. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentations at around 1 o'clock, 1:10. I'd like to thank our moderator and initiator, Court Gould, for guiding the conversation with our panelists today. This program is a follow-on to his Jefferson report, also called Erie's Diversity is the Path to Prosperity. Mr. Gould served 20 years as founding executive director of Sustainable Pittsburgh. After 3 years with the Erie Community Foundation as vice president of community impact, Mr. Gould is a sustainable solutions consultant and certified professional coach. With this, I'd like to hand over to you, Kurt.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Jefferson Educational Society, our panelists, and all who are joining on this snowy Erie Friday to tackle the teacher-to-student mismatch topic. I'll briefly serve up the issues and then introduce in brief our panel of experts. After their sharing insights, we'll take up Q&A from the viewers. So overall, the benefits of diversity among the teaching ranks is well substantiated by many studies and research. Having at least one Black teacher early on reduces a Black student's likelihood of dropping out and increases Black students' likelihood of going to college, among benefits. Among the paybacks of a diverse teaching staff, especially in a place like Erie with our remarkable cultural and racial richness, the benefits actually accrue to all students in our world that requires culturally competent understandings and the benefits of diverse teaching styles. From our panelists, we'll hear more about this convergence of interests around the win-win promise in outcomes when teachers look more like their students. But there's much more to be done, as we all know, to close the mismatch gap. The Pennsylvania Department of Education acknowledges the disparity, stating on its website, and I'll quote, "While Pennsylvania has more than 120,000 teachers, 96% are white, making the state's educator workforce the least diverse in the country. Said another way, more than a third of Pennsylvania's students are children of color, and just 4 or maybe 6% of its educators are teachers of color, one of the starkest gaps in the country." Right here in Erie's public schools, in the 2019-2020 school year, approximately 61% of the some 10,440 students were non-white, and at that time 39% were white. Conversely, of the some 742 teachers, about 3% were non-white. And today, the Erie Times News has thorough coverage of the mismatch issue as part of its reporting on Miss Lori Pickens becoming the first Black woman to serve as the president of the Erie School Board. As we will hear, stemming from Superintendent Brian Polito's 2017 plan for racial diversity, and with hiring Ken Nickson as the district's first coordinator of educational diversity, equity, and inclusion, the school district is doing an awful lot, and gains indeed are being realized to narrow the mismatch among teachers and students. For example, again, today in the Erie Times News, it reports that as indicator of progress in the 2016-17 school year, there were 21 Black teachers compared to now in the 21-22 year, the number has risen to 31. But as the hard work continues, we have considerably more that needs to be done to redress the mismatch gap. As Ms. Pickens, I mentioned the new school board director, is quoted in today's newspaper. She says, "It's a good direction, a very slow direction. I'd like to see us be more intentional about the effort. We're doing this not just to get the job done, but because we should be doing it anyway. Along those lines, among recommendations I made in the report I wrote was the need for more dedicated funding to the matter. And it sure seems that the smart money is recognizing the imperative of diverse teachers. For example, Pennsylvania's PA Smart Funding Program seeks to expand access to STEM and computer science teaching and learning to accelerate economic growth. The current state round of PA Smart big grants includes an express priority to diversify the number of computer science and STEM educators at all levels. Another example of the good money helping in this respect, the CEO of PNC Bank, who's an Allegheny College grad not far from Erie, has personally gifted $1 million for the Advancing Educators of Color Scholarship that aims to add 35 Black educators to the Pittsburgh public school system in the next 7 years through a full tuition scholarships to high school graduates who commit to teaching in the city for 5 years after earning degrees. Also noteworthy, our panelist Tanya Garcia has indicated that Pennsylvania school districts can use Federal American Rescue Act money in multiple ways to help improve teacher diversity. So I'll end there with an overview, as our panelists have so much more experience and richness to share. And I'll mention them in brief and then start with Tanya. Tanya Garcia is Deputy Secretary of the Office of Postsecondary and Higher Education at the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Mr. Sharif El-Mekki is founder and CEO of the Center for Black Educator Development. The center works to ensure there will be equity in recruiting, training, hiring, and retention of quality educators that reflect the students they serve. Among initiatives I hope he'll mention, Mr. El-Mekki is the leader with the Pennsylvania Educator Diversity Consortium. We all know Superintendent Brian Polito, leading Erie's public schools. And as I mentioned, Ken Nickson serves as Erie Public Schools Coordinator of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And again, thank you for taking the time to be part of the panel. So Tanya, let's please start with you. If you would share why the teacher diversity issue matters, and along the lines I mentioned, why funds are lining up with critical elements of teacher training, placement, and the retention continuum, and what's working. Thank you. Tanya?
Thank you so much, Court. I am so delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And also really excellent analysis in the brief that you've shared the highlights from. I'm going to share my screen. As most people know, I like having graphics to go with what I'm saying. And so let me go to the slides that I've prepared and go into the presentation mode. Can you all see that? Great, great, great. And can you hear me okay? All right. All right, let's jump right in. Okay, I have about 3 sections that I'm going to go through, and thanks for bearing with me because I want to make sure that I focus on not just the state of teacher diversity, but some of the broader trends that are facing us as a nation and as a Commonwealth, and also how some of the other priorities that I'm leading here at PDE fit in, and then come back to something really exciting that we've been working on and that are working to unveil in the next, I don't know, a few weeks. So here we go. All right, so just in case we don't know why teacher diversity matters, we have excellent research that has been put out by the Research for Action. And, you know, these are all, you know, very, very important things to keep in mind on why we need a diverse educator workforce. And of course, teachers are part of the educator workforce in every state. And so these are all the excellent things that happen as a result of having diverse teachers. I was personally blessed by having Miss Randall in my first grade elementary school experience. She's the first African-American teacher I had. Then Mrs. Keys, who was a Jamaican immigrant, who, taught me sixth grade. And then I had a couple of Latino teachers, Miss Garcia and Mr. Jurado. Miss Garcia taught me French, and Mr. Jurado, wasn't as successful in teaching me mechanical physics, but when it came to electrodynamics and physics, I learned a lot from him. And so these are the four teachers that I've had in my life that really, really gave me, a lot of confidence and a lot of support. And, I'm an example of someone who benefited from having teachers of color in my K through 12 educational experience. And so mitigating implicit bias, we all have implicit bias, and so getting to know people who don't look like you and who do look like you is part of that educational experience. So the last one that I'm going to highlight here on the screen is the one that's very, very near to my heart right now, which is increasing the likelihood of enrolling in a four-year college. So this comes from the Patching the Leaky Pipeline report. You have the link there, and I'll be sharing these slides when I complete this presentation. So I want to go into why. Oh goodness, I believe I don't have the latest slides that I'm sharing here. Sorry about that. Okay, here we go. Let's try that again. What is happening here? Sorry, everyone. Nope. Sorry. Give me just a quick second here. I clearly have this up. I'm sorry, buddy. It's skipping some of the content here and I'm not sure what's quite happening here. I know what was happening. I had the wrong title to that slide, and that was throwing me off. Can you see the screen now? No? Okay, hold on. There we go. Okay. Thank you, everyone. All right, so this also comes from Research for Action and a later report. And I just wanted to draw attention to the current status of, the teacher to student ratios, and, how that really hasn't changed a lot in the last, several years. And so one of the things that concerns me the most about this data is that as we approach 2025, we're going to need to see incredible jumps in the number of students of color, multiracial students, that is really going to make these disparities even wider. And part of why 2025 is so important is because as we approach that year, we are going to see a decline in the number of K through 12 students, but within that decline, we're going to see a decline in the number of white high school graduates and an increase in the number of students of color, multiracial students, basically the students that are most vulnerable in our system. And so we really need to act now in order to prevent some of the even greater disparities that might await us if we don't start now. So this is the latest data that we have. I pulled this from our post-secondary information management system. And this is what it looks like right here, right now. These are active classroom teachers in Pennsylvania schools. And, we have a slight drop right now in the number of white teachers, 93.6%, but it doesn't look good, right, for what we need to be preparing for. And so that this is the current status of teachers that are active in Pennsylvania classrooms, 121,480 of them. So wanted to share some updated data based on what we know now. So that's the source here. So I'm going to shift right now. It's going to seem like, why are you going to talk about post-secondary attainment? But I really need us all to understand the situation here and how it relates to the educator workforce in general, and of course, teachers. So attainment, post-secondary attainment is really a dynamic metric that every single state in the nation is focusing on. And attainment consists of three elements: the number of Pennsylvania high school graduates who are coming out of our K through 12 system, the number of students enrolling in our Pennsylvania colleges and universities. Some of those students are PA high school graduates, some of them come from out of state. And then last but not least, there's in and out migration that affects, increaser of post-secondary attainment for the Commonwealth by virtue of having moved here a couple of years ago. So attainment is a really, really important thing that we can use to measure the health and the levels of education of Pennsylvania residents. And so that I wanted everyone to have a clear definition of what attainment means. And so for those of you who aren't aware, the State Board of Education in 2018 set this goal to increase post-secondary attainment in the Commonwealth. And really until now, we have had that goal, but we haven't really been making any plans to really reach that goal. And so here's where we're currently at right now. So no one should be excited about 50.7%. Yes, it's close to 60%, but let's not get overly excited about any of these figures, because the next slide is going to be very, very sobering for us all. So when we look at attainment, we obviously look at the rate of enrollment of our Pennsylvania high school graduates into post-secondary education. And so this is what enrollment the latest data shows, that here are the proportions of enrollments from our Pennsylvania high school graduates into post-secondary education. And this is, if all we wanted were for our Asian Pennsylvanians to reach our post-secondary attainment goal, we could all pack our bags and go home. None of us, really need to be here. But that would not be equitable post-secondary attainment. And so when I look at these percentages, I really, really worry about all of the other racial ethnic groups who, are either not being encouraged to go to college, or are not seeing the importance of going to college, because everybody, at least 63% of all jobs in Pennsylvania by 2025 will require some form of post-secondary credential. So enrollment is one side of the piece, and the other historical metric and marker we need to look at is the prior generations. What is the extent to which they have earned a post-secondary credential and are now hopefully working with that credential? And so when we look at it by race, ethnicity, this is what we currently have. So not only are not all white, Native American, Black or African American or Hispanic or Latinx high school graduates enrolling in post-secondary education, the generations that came before them, are not, those rates are lower. Yes, we see some improvements in the rate of enrollment in post-secondary versus those who are currently working with a post-secondary credential, but it is simply not enough for us to reach our post-secondary attainment goal of 60% by 2025. And so here's the main conclusion I'd like us all to really think about when we look at the pipeline of individuals who are coming to get a post-secondary education, which obviously is a prerequisite for being able to declare education as a major and to prepare to become the Commonwealth's next teachers, school leaders, and all of the educator professions that make up our enterprise. So here's the other sobering statistic. We have over 1 million Pennsylvanian souls who attempted to go to college at one point, but did not earn what they came to get. And here's how many of them are currently enrolled in post-secondary education. Our institutions of higher education are were primarily designed to enroll high school graduates, and now we have to expand who we're welcoming to our college campuses, because with the decline in the K through 12 population, we're not going to be able to reach our goal by simply enrolling more high school graduates. We also need to look at adults who at one time attempted to earn a post-secondary credential, but were unable to. And that's also going to be critical to achieving our post-secondary attainment goal here in the Commonwealth. So these are the challenges as I see them. We have we're going to have less high school graduates as the years go by. That population is going to decline because of demographic changes. We have an excellent post-secondary educational landscape that is super rich and diverse, but not all of them are going to be able to really welcome additional students on campus because that isn't really the model that they were built on. And so, but something's got to change, because our economy, not just in Pennsylvania, but across the nation, is increasingly dependent on people with the post-secondary credential. So why we're updating Pennsylvania's master plan for higher education is, is really the core of what we need to do in order to prepare for the changes and the needs that we have. And so this is how I look at our process and our partnership with the State Board of Education, Council of Higher Education, to make good on the attainment goal that they set in 2018. We need a master plan that can help us reach it. So Pennsylvania cannot increase credential completion. So that's the first strategic priority of the master plan for higher education, unless we both increase college affordability and increase the transparency and the value of post-secondary credentials, all in order to erase equity gaps by all of these important disaggregations, all the while innovating and redesigning post-secondary institutions for today's learners. So Sharif El-Mekki is one of the members of Pennsylvania's Master Plan Advisory Committee. And so he's been engaging in those conversations with other leaders from the post-secondary sector. And so all of these things really need to happen in order for us to reach the goal. So I'm not trying to scare anybody, but in an exaggerated way, but I really need everyone to be on the same page with regard to how much harder it is to prepare individuals based on the U.S. economy that we have had for decades, but that many people really don't know, how truly complex it is. So as of 2010, these top figures are from a report that I led at the Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce. While the figures are a little bit dated, it has not become less complex here. And so we have had a tripling of occupations in about a 50 or 60 year period. We now have 840. We have a quintupling of programs of study. Back in the last 25 years or so, we had much fewer programs of studies, or majors, as some people call them. But now we have 5 times as many as we did 25 years ago. We've had a doubling of the number of colleges and universities. And we have seen a 10-fold increase in the number of post-secondary learners. And so just imagine, just multiply all of those things together, and it makes for a very, very difficult decision-making process for Pennsylvania residents to really navigate. The bottom stats come from Credential Engine. They did a national analysis of, how many credentials we have in the United States. We have almost 1 million. Over 15,000 of those are unique to Pennsylvania. And the vast majority, about 90% of those credentials in Pennsylvania, are awarded by our post-secondary institutions. So these are the stats that really define what we're working on, and what we need to focus on, because students have so many more decisions to make, and these decisions have economic consequences, right, in terms of how much debt they want to take on, how much they're going to be earning when they complete their studies. And we really need to come together to help individuals to make these decisions, because it's, if we have a lot of first-generation students, I was first-generation, there's just no way I could possibly even navigate this landscape right now. So moving on to the importance of belonging. So we cannot achieve post-secondary attainment without building that sense of belonging that all of us need. So the PDE senior team just finished reading this book together, and this definition is pretty much, the definition that we should all memorize and incorporate into the way in which we treat each other, right? And so that that is really, I think, the missing piece here in our ability to prepare young learners for the world that awaits them. And so part of what Cobb and Crown Apple highlight is that right now we have our priorities out of whack. So we expect individuals to sacrifice belonging in order to, prove. We expect them to achieve before we are able to make them feel, oh, okay, you're achieving at these rates, therefore you belong. But it's a false sense of belonging because it really, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we need the physiological and safety and belonging to be foundational before we're able to achieve or reach self-actualization. And so this is not anything that we should continue to endorse or support. Instead, what I'm hoping we turn towards is, this graphic, which puts belonging where it belongs. We are not set up as a nation or as a commonwealth to really accept individuals, their lived experiences, and this is really, really critical when it comes to educators, right? We all knew at a very early age whether or not our teachers and school leaders believed in us. And whenever we did not feel that, present company included, it probably affected the learning that had to happen and just how we felt about ourselves and what future we envisioned for ourselves. And so this is really critical, not just for all young learners, but also acknowledging that as professionals, we have all been navigating spaces where we did not belong. I am certainly, a product of not always having felt like I belonged in certain situations. And so we need to dramatically change the way in which we engage and, bring people in and honor what they come with, right?
Tanya, if you take another moment and we'll segue to Mr. El-Mekki.
Sure. So I'll end with this. We have to take all of these social identities into account. We have to accept all of them. And, none of us should be willing to give up any of these aspects of our social identity in order to belong. And so I will stop it right there. I did have more slides, but we will come back to them as we, come back into the panel conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garcia. And when we get to the Q&A, there's a question that would be eager for concrete evidence or examples of some of the funding that illustrates the state's commitment to closing the mismatch gap. So, Mr. El-Mekki, remarkable organization that you lead. Another article in Erie Times News just yesterday that was picked up that you penned with regard to inequities across the state among school districts. Please share with us, if you would, a little about your Center for Black Educator Development, what's at stake for our students, our community, and the systems change that's needed, that's being addressed by the Pennsylvania Educator Diversity Consortium that you help lead. So welcome and thank you.
No, thank you both. I think it's really important, and you started off with some of the data about the impact of Black teachers. Dr. Garcia shared the impact, and we've always known the short-term impact. The belongingness, the self-actualization, the academic, but we know there's been studies to talk about the long-term impact as well. More likely to go to college, less likely to go to high school. I mean, less likely to drop out of high school, I should say. Excuse me. And so we know that. Myself as a teacher and a principal, I wasn't invited into the profession of teaching until after I graduated from college. And some of the first group of Black men that I worked with, that I partnered with to mentor other young Black men, ended up being 17 of us. And what we realized is not a single one of us had been invited into the profession while we were in high school, while we were in college. It was post-bac for us. And we asked our colleagues, most of them were white women. The average response was third grade was when they remembered an adult engaging them in teaching, the idea of them teaching. They could see themselves as teachers. So third grade for one group, post-bac for another group. And so I would just say, like, this idea of representation is extremely important. And I want to, just start off with, tribute to Terrence Williams, who was one of my students. This is me teaching a long time ago. Turner Middle School in Southwest Philadelphia. I was there for 10 years. Started off as a teacher. My last year was assistant principal. Terrence is now a teacher in a suburb of Philadelphia in Upper Darby. And he's recently applied to be an assistant principal. And to hear him talk about his experience in my classroom, and at that time I didn't have the understanding of the lack of diversity. Even though I was I was one of two full-time Black men teachers in my school. I was so focused on my classroom instruction and pedagogy that I didn't even realize, like, the entire landscape was just devoid of Black men. And Terrence, I call on him a lot, and many other students that I had who became teachers, even though I wasn't specifically talking to them about teaching. And when I asked them, well, what happened? What made you, and none of them, to my recollection, expressed the desire to be a teacher. When I taught them, one of the things that they talked about was their experiences in my classroom and other teachers' classrooms, that they looked at that as having such a compelling experience, that they felt included, that they felt seen, that they felt that they belonged, that they felt like they owned the classroom, and that they wanted to continue to pay that forward. And so I'll talk a little bit about the Center for Black Educator Development, but I'll give one little anecdote. I was a principal and, for 16 years, and often we were really trying to find out, how do we create this diverse community of lead learners, of educators. And what we saw was, time and time again, we weren't even getting candidates. And when I spoke to some of the talent in recruitment, they said, well, we don't really send you candidates because you're a Black man. And it was this assumption, like, because you have this thing, and I felt very tokenized, because they felt like, you are this Black man, and so we'll find other places to put these diverse candidates. And it really struck me that there was such a deep misunderstanding across the pipeline, not just the school base, but the systems themselves, of how disconnected they were from the realities on the ground. And then lastly, I would say a student, a junior, who said that she wanted to be a teacher. She said there was no place for her to actually practice teaching. She said when she talks about teaching, people say, oh, you love kids, you should babysit. Or, hey, come help me grade these papers, or help me with the bulletin board. And what she expressed was, she had a deep desire to learn the art and science of teaching, to develop a pedagogical framework that she could wrestle with while she was still in high school. And that's really what helped us form this idea of the Center for Black Educator Development, where our goal is to build a national Black teacher pipeline, or I should say rebuild it. Because before the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education, which ended up unleashing a series of events, which almost 40,000 Black teachers were fired or demoted or laid off. And so we want to kind of rebuild this a Black teacher pipeline that's predictable, that's sustainable, that's highly effective, that can help increase the teacher diversity in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And so we just have a little graphic just to kind of share how we're thinking about it. We look at the Black teacher pipeline as 12 years long, where it has early exposure as well as clinical experiences while students are still in high school. And so in high school, we have Teacher Academy, where we have curriculum and content, where high schools can actually have a course, an elective that shares, this is what teaching is, but here's teaching from a Black pedagogical framework, from a Black historical lens. How have Black people looked at education, which is outside of schooling? That schooling is the mechanism to delivering instruction and learning, but there are also other mechanisms that in Black communities have always been viewed as part of the educational system. And so we look at that, and we use that grounding to develop this LeCount-Caddo curriculum. And quiet as it's kept, while many people are talking about teacher diversity today, let's just say that Caroline LeCount and others were talking about more Black teachers in the 1800s in Pennsylvania. So the 1800s. So while we're still talking about it now, they were talking about in the 1800s when the Black students walked out of school in protest in 1967 here in Philadelphia. They were also talking about one of their demands was more Black teachers. So we know this has been an ongoing push, struggle, fight for communities to diversify. But we believe in early exposure and clinical experiences. So not only can students have these teacher academies where they're taking an elective that should be graded and matched to a clinical experience that we have either after school as well as during the summer for our Freedom School Literacy Academy, where students actually are paid apprentices. They're paid apprentices that teach first, second, and third graders. And because we believe like in an intergenerational model and learning in communities happens even outside of schooling systems. Youth are always teaching their peers as well as those who are younger than them, as well as us who are elders. But what could a ninth grader teach a first grader about early literacy, about phonics? What could a junior in high school teach a third grader about positive racial identity and learning, right? And so that is the model that we use, where we have high school students, college students who are paid to explore what it means to teach, what are the skills, the mindset, the art and science necessary to be effective leaders of classrooms. And they practice that with first, second, and third graders, and they're coached by the staff of the Center for Black Educator Development. So you have this high school and college, but we also know that financial struggles are real. The cost of college continues to go up. And so students who are able to participate in either our Teacher Academy or our Freedom Schools Literacy Academy, which is out of school time, summer and after school, they're eligible to apply for a fellowship with us that we have a partnership with the United Negro College Fund. So students who have come through our program, they're able to apply for this fellowship, which includes last dollar scholarships, as well as teacher retention bonuses, regardless of their collective bargaining agreement. It comes from the fundraising from us, and we're also hoping that public dollars will be matched with this, where students commit to teaching, and then they have retention bonuses for their first 4 years of teaching. And we're hoping after that, then we can help support them get into board certification and other ways to continue their learning, continue their development, be a part of, Teach Plus and, weigh in on policies, share their lived and professional experiences as part of the teaching. So that induction part is married to the college experience, which is married to the high school experience. So for us, this is why this is 12 years, 12 years long. Really grateful that we are, a part of the Pennsylvania Educator Diversity Consortium. Not only have we been bringing people together as, yearly to discuss this, this issue of diversity, this issue of sustainability. We don't want this just to be a policy thing that someone else can change years later. We know that it is deeply rooted in accelerating student achievement, accelerating the success and lived experiences across the Commonwealth. And so what we're able to do with the Pennsylvania Educator Diversity Consortium, I think I'm most proud of, are the toolkits, because we also believe that people should have things to use so that we're not just admiring the issue or, talking about theoretically what's going on. We can actually provide toolkits for educators and policymakers across the state. And these toolkits are culturally responsive sustaining education. There's a toolkit for mentorship. There's a toolkit for recruitment as well as retention. So these are things that we hear from districts all the time that they're grappling with. How do I retain teachers? I've hired more teachers of color, but the attrition rate has also gone up. How do I retain them? Other districts are talking about, how do we even recruit? We don't know how to recruit, or we're not successful at it. What should we do? So there's a retention toolkit. Then there's other about mentorship. What is the role of mentorship and sponsorship in the field of education? You know, if we look at other professions, a doctor, you can't even imagine someone in the medical field not having some type of mentor or sponsor, and that it is, you know, collected and curated in a way that supports that person all the way through their residency, all the way until they get to education, or to their, you know, the medical field. Where in education, I hear things like, you know, oh, feet are thrown in the fire, or sink or swim, and that is the wrong way to think about people who are leading classrooms, who are leading schools, who are supposed to be in support of the most important resources this Commonwealth has, which is our children, which is our collective future. And so we can't have this idea like sink or swim. We have to make sure that we are providing an ecosystem that is deeply supportive, that has all the components that we know will impact. And all this is for accelerating the students' achievement level. So at PEDC, you know, we originally came together through Pennsylvania Department of Education's funding stream that funded Aspiring to Educate, which was an initiative that was launched in the previous administration. And we were able to launch this consortium. And we've been not only continuing to work together, but to provide resources, to provide support, and help connect the dots across the Commonwealth. You know, we're very glad to have, you know, a significant number of educators from the western part of the state, and it includes IHEs, nonprofits, educators in the field, who are coming together to really address and try to tackle this complex issue that, you know, which is the reason why we're all here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. El-Mekki. Obviously, some follow-up questions on my mind will be ways in which you might recommend that Erie take part and get on board with the programs that you're offering through your Center for Black Educator Development, but also importantly through the Pennsylvania Educator Diversity Consortium. There are many points along that continuum for the whole community support, is what I took from your comments. Much is being done here already, but I suspect that your programming represents some richness that Erie could benefit from. So we'll come back to you during Q&A. That's a warm-up. With that, Ken Nickson has been working doggedly on this agenda along the continuum that you've well described, Sharif and Tanya. Ken, we appreciate your efforts and welcome your sharing a bit about what you're seeing and experiencing that is most effective, working best, and where you and the school district are putting your bets on the best, most effective approaches to increase the gains that you're making. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, thank you, Court. Thank you very much. I'm definitely honored to be here today to be speaking about teacher diversity and some of the work that has been done over the course of years. I do want to definitely just pay respects to follow behind Mr. Sharif El-Mekki, because it's an honor. Definitely followed your work, and I really appreciate it, and you definitely inspired me to do what I'm doing. So just want to give that shout out. So yes, sir. So since December 2017, when I first became coordinator of diversity, equity, inclusion, we took a refresh group of what was then the equity and inclusion group, and we created a diversity, equity, inclusion team. And basically we put together a teacher diversity action plan. So that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about today. So again, that was December 2017. We had a board approved teacher diversity action plan, also known as the TDAP. The TDAP is 4 steps. I'm going to get into a little bit more about those to answer your question specifically, Court. So the first step that we had was the homegrown recruitment, which is really student focused, and it's the GYO, or also known as the Grow Your Own. So what we're doing with that is being very, very intentional about speaking to students about becoming teachers. How we're doing that is partnerships with our local universities. So one university that we're really working diligently with is Edinboro University. So we actually partnered and created what's called the Borough Teach program. So Borough Teach really focuses on sophomore students who are first generation, who have that aspiration to become a teacher. So we really are intentional about finding these students within the schools, making sure that they've we're not looking for the cream of the crop, but we're definitely looking for a student that has the tenacity, has the grit, and the wherewithal to be able to push themselves through, to be able to maintain and keep up with the high standards of having a 3.0, to get your master's and et cetera. So with that being said, we have our first cohort running this year, where students are taking intro level, teacher induction courses taught by a adjunct professor right from Edinboro University. What's really nice about it is the students are taught within our high school building. So our traditional school, traditional current tech school called Erie High, is about 2,000 students. We have the professor coming right in there and teaching our students hands-on. So that's been a great opportunity for our students to really push forward. We also have another connection with Gannon University, which is a teacher residency model. So we've done some work with Gannon, and they've really fast forwarded on where they're going with the teacher residency. And again, it helps give students that full year of experience through a clinical process with student teaching, getting them where it focuses more on experience, classroom experience over content. So that's been another key feature in the homegrown approach to help us really get some of those students that are coming from our district to fast forward into getting their education. So what's really nice about the Borough Teach that I just want to step back on is in their junior year, they'll actually commit to what certification that they want to get. So it's huge to see a 16-year-old making that commitment. I want to teach elementary, pre-K 4. I want to teach social studies 7 through 12. But they're making that commitment. And then after those 2 years, they'll walk out with 12 college credits under their belt through the dual enrollment process. And they'll also have their first year of college paid for. And that's through Edinboro University. So that's been a huge, one of the highlights, I would say, when you mentioned what's working. I would say that is one key component or key initiative that's been working. Behind that, there's a lot more intentionality of like myself and other teachers of color going into some of the elective courses, freshman, sophomore, junior seminar courses, and talking to them specifically about becoming teachers. And it's just having open, informal dialogue with them, so they kind of grasp the importance of where they can go and what they can become. The other part to that as well is we have what's called the Early Childhood Development Lab. So again, at our school, we have a current tech aspect. So they have a lab there that basically houses students who are working on specifically coming out with, again, 12 dual enrollment accredited program. They can come out with 9 to 12 credits. They're getting real life experience. Our 9th and 10th graders are supporting or doing an internship process or with the YMCAs. So they're getting hands-on experience right with the pre-K, with that pre-K level, the daycare pre-K level. And then we have our 11th and 12th graders, which are actually starting the day with our own pre-Ks. So we have 10 elementary buildings in our district, and we house 10 pre-Ks at every one of our buildings. So it's nice to see our juniors and seniors be able to go right in and get that hands-on experience with what a teacher really needs to do and become. So in addition to that, some of the local universities offer some scholarship opportunities. Gannon has the Archbishop Scholarship. We do work with Edinboro's program that really focuses in on the fellowship model. And a lot of times that adjunct professor is a key person that's within our building. So the homegrown approach has been something that's been very, very beneficial to us, and is definitely like our first step for a reason. Behind that, we also have 8th graders pre-COVID. We have 8th graders that come in and tour the building, and we absolutely go through and talk to them about teaching. And we talk to them about the Early Childhood Development Lab to give them that real hands-on experience and have that open dialogue and conversation. Because like to Mr. El-Mekki's point, not having any type of experience or any type of conversation even about what a teacher is and what teacher can do, I can see that as definitely being a point that we have to take under consideration. So, but that's one thing that we do, is just make sure that the element, it's not down to elementary level, but at the middle school level, they're hearing it and they're talking about it. So that's a lot of what's behind the step one, the homegrown approach for the student focus. We also partnership with Go College, our trio programming that also supports that work and that effort of just encouraging kids to get that experience at the college level or find out what is that post-secondary education all about. So we do a lot of support through that. The second step, which is about recruiting our locally degreed professional, and also identifying individuals for alternative certification. So really it's been focused on alternative certification. And with that being said, that has been probably our most productive, because as you talk about the student as the number one step, that's the homegrown approach. Well, as you know, you're talking about a 4 to 6 year time span before we see the turnaround of these students be able to be interviewed and to come into our school district. So that's going to be a little bit more long time. But this more recent one with the alternative certification has been very promising and very much more immediate. We've had great connections with people throughout our community. As soon as once we started the TDAP and once I was in my position and we started making connections with the community, you could start to see more people of color come into the school district and more people of color coming in to check out the posting in HR to kind of see what's going on and what is the district offering. They're starting to be a level of trust built within our district. And so one aspect that we were able to put in place this year was the district education support, which is also DES. So this district education support teacher was a faster way that we could get a locally degreed professional who wanted to see what it's like to become a teacher, who had that knack that they felt like they wanted to be a teacher before or they wanted to shift their career. We have been able to fast forward and get them in the classroom, basically as a hired teacher, and getting the full experience right hands-on to be able to make that determination that, yes, this is what I want to do. And with that, then once we get them that experience and once they know that this is where they want to go, then we have those connections to the local universities or other universities of their choosing to help get them that degree that they need so that we can get them into the classroom. And one big part of that was a lot of extensive work that was done with the teacher contract, which we had some breakthroughs with that. And I wanted to take a quick pause and shift that to Mr. Polito to talk a little bit about that.
So early on, when Ken started implementing this plan, he identified a number of individuals in the community that had a college degree, but not a teaching certificate, that really had connections with our community and our kids, really had an interest in wanting to teach, but just didn't have that certificate. So he started working with those individuals to try to connect them with the universities to get the additional coursework they needed to get certified. And very quickly, we discovered that the biggest issue was finance, where these individuals had a desire to come in and teach, but there was no funding available to get that additional coursework. So we, for the next teacher negotiation, which we just finished that up in November, we made getting college tuition reimbursement for our staff a priority in negotiations. And that was a win-win for us, because that's a benefit that most of the school districts in the area have, and we didn't, but it also will help us really kickstart our initiative here, where we can identify a individual that does have that college degree and get that person emergency certified and hired in the district. Once the individual's hired, then they're part of that collective bargaining agreement and are eligible for the district to reimburse them for the tuition. So we're very excited about that. Again, I think that's going to go a long way over this next year to increasing our diversity efforts.
Thank you, Mr. So the other steps, so that would be the alternate certification, which again, when you talk about immediacy, that's where we've seen the most benefit. And it's been fantastic having conversations with folks who have been in criminal justice or been in the business realm, or they're working at maybe a local student facility. And just for them to be able to come back and make that shift into the classroom, it's been eye-opening, and it's been fantastic to see the connections of not only them becoming teachers, but even some of them are even coaches. So they're coaches in our district. So now you have that great extra added bonus of having someone who's already had that relationship with kids now come in and become teachers, where they can identify and relate right to them, seeing them in the hallways that they get to see them on the field at. So I know I'm getting close. The next two steps. So the step 3 would be the recruitment of future teacher candidates and substitute teachers and paraprofessionals. So what we've done with that is basically taken an 8-hour, taking the peeling back the onion approach of an 8-hour radius out. So the group that I mentioned, the diversity, equity, inclusion group, which we also call the Goal 4 team, we took a look and basically went through all the HBCUs within an 8-hour radius and looked at a lot of the teaching universities within an 8-hour radius. And if you had went to those schools or had any connection, family, we try to make those type of personal connections to those universities. We put together a 1-page flyer that was very attractive and appealing, and we got that out to those clinical student teacher directors. And we also created a SWAY, which is an electronic version of our recruiter packet, so they could flood that out to their student teacher candidates that were coming up. We've also been intentional about putting flyers and articles and hits out on Indeed, which is nationwide app for recruitment, as well as putting articles in those local newspapers at those 8-hour radius. So cities like Buffalo, Cleveland, Jamestown, New York, those types of places that are close to us, that have some diversity that we could pull from. And the fourth one that we started to was to really put an emphasis on the community shift, being education and being number one in our city and our community. There was maybe go back 30 years or so. Education was critical. Everywhere you go, families, communities, churches, everybody was kind of supporting and thriving on the education component. So we've been very intentional about, utilizing our PA Smart Futures and the artifacts, and being intentional about trying to line up some of that focus and becoming why education is so critical. The other component too is just recently we've done a lot of work with the mayor's office. We are putting together something called a speaker series where our students will get to see local professionals, local nonprofit leaders be able to come in and speak to their classroom, all about making that connection to people of color and the fact that they can be something greater and bigger than where they see people of color at in our community right now. So that was quick, but those are some of the 4 steps that we've been putting in place and working diligently on, and that's the Teacher Diversity Action Plan for Erie Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. There's a lot for everyone to absorb there, and we'll look forward to more dialogue. Just as a warm up to a question that'll come your way during Q&A is with regard to what are the metrics, the key indicators and the results of your Erie Grow Your Own approach that you're taking. So that'll be helpful. Superintendent Polito, I'm very interested in acknowledging your leadership, having made this a priority at the start of your tenure. What are you seeing that has been working that you feel needs to be doubled down on? We're going to hear some more from Dr. Garcia about funding streams that may be available, and something that's been coming through from the dialogue, at least for me, is naturally learning outcomes for students, but just how critical that is to preparing them to seek post-secondary education, to equip them to be productive contributors to our community and in our economy. And being a numbers guy yourself, I'm sure that measures high. We're very interested in your thoughts.
Just like we found with our local professionals, funding is very important to these type of initiatives. Ken has done a great job of really working with our local universities to try to find additional funding for these students that are going into college that may want to come back and teach for us. But there needs to be additional work there. We really need to find an easy way to get those students grants and scholarships to really move into the teacher workforce and help improve our diversity efforts. I think Ken did a great job of covering where we are with our initiatives, but the couple of things that I just want to add that we found is that this process really, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It takes time to really see results. And as you mentioned, we made this a priority 5 years ago and are just now starting to see the results with the increase in our diversity. In addition to having a commitment to diversity, you really need a well thought out plan and, again, the resources to execute it. The other thing, again, that I think is very important is committing to removing institutional barriers that may be hindering progress. And I think the tuition reimbursement is a good example of that, where Ken was able to find some great candidates for us, but we found that the finance was really a barrier there, and we were able to find a way to remove that. But again, that took time because we had our teacher contract in place. We had to wait for that to expire and make that a priority in negotiations. Finally, I want to thank all our experts today for sharing the importance of teacher diversity and how it has direct impact on improving student outcomes. I think there's a lot of great takeaways today, especially for us. I think Ken and I are going to have a few conversations after this, and we'll be able to adjust our approach as well.
Thank you, Brian. While you're talking about some of the benefits that are needed for teachers to be competitive with other school districts near and far, curious about the role of the unions in this issue. Supportive, where could they be more on board? Is it going fine? How can the community help in that regard? Any thoughts?
I think the union has been very supportive of our initiatives. We've over the last couple of years have had weekly meetings with our union leadership, and this is a topic that comes up often. We work with them to ensure that we're moving in the same direction. Again, they do understand the need to diversify the workforce. I think, again, that was a priority for us in negotiations, and they were able to agree to that initiative in the final contract.
Great, thank you. Dr. Garcia, I'm going to read a quote from the leader of the University of Pittsburgh's new Department of Teaching and Learning and Leading. Sabina Vaught said, "Initiatives to promote teacher diversity are good, but they're not on their own sufficient. The kind of approaches does nothing to change the whiteness of the system," she said. "It brings new teachers in, but forces them into systems that don't change. So people leave the teaching profession." I thought that related perhaps to the pipeline slippage points that you described. Thinking broadly about the nation, Pennsylvania, and other areas, we've heard a little bit about this whole system, the HR process. What might you say in response?
Wow, that's a great setup, great quote. It brings me back to what I was saying earlier about belonging, right? So we're not just talking about belonging in school settings, we're talking about belonging in communities. And, a lot of data has demonstrated that, certain districts have 0 teachers of color, right? And so what we're essentially saying when we state that is that there should be, right? And the other thing that I have been thinking a lot about is, are we creating communities that are welcoming, that are reflective of the demographics of the student population? And are we creating communities of support, networks of support, so that newcomers to the communities that we're all talking about want to stay and want to continue in the career pathway that they've chosen, and that we need to encourage them to continue in. And so that to me is one of the things I haven't heard a lot of thought and consideration around. It's not just bringing a teacher of color into a classroom. It's also how what is in place at the community level in order to make them feel welcome and feel that sense of belonging that every single individual needs at all ages, right? And so that's where, you know, I know that when I visited Erie, I can't remember, I think it was last summer, to commemorate the inauguration of Erie County Community College. We, you know, we definitely, oh gosh, I forgot what I was saying. We heard, you know, we heard about everything that, we heard from the representative of the New Americans Center in the mayor's office. And you know, I got some really nice document really showing who the New Americans are in Erie. And, you know, that is a pretty welcoming kind of thing. Do the rest of Erie residents know that that exists and how the demographics of Erie are changing? I think that is something that I would like to see more widespread.
Great, thank you. Sharif and Ken, I'd welcome the two of you talking together for all of us to be inspired on, Sharif, what you see Ken could benefit from, how Erie Public Schools can be more engaged in the statewide, the regional ecosystems that you're helping develop, and Ken, how you think you could pivot off of that. Sharif?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was really excited to hear how Ken was thinking about this complex issue. I think too often people, you know, district leaders in particular, they're looking at one component of the pipeline and not thinking about the others and how it all intersects. So I was, really excited to hear about the work that you and Brian are doing. Connecting, looking at alternative certification, methods, looking at the sustainability and the retention, looking at high school engagement, all of those things I think is part of the ecosystem. And again, it's not just who's leading the classrooms, right? It's the ecosystem. Who's leading the classroom, but who's choosing the curricula, who's purchasing, approving that, who's creating policies, who's training the teachers who are leading those classrooms, right? And so it's all of that. And I think the more comprehensive approach is the way to make this sustainable. What I hope, Ken, is that we have a cohort of young Black Erie youth in our Freedom Schools program this summer. So we're not only in person, we're in person in Detroit, Camden, and Philly, but we have a virtual program as well. So these paid apprentices are able to teach virtually, first, second, and third graders. And I'll send you at another point our report card. They are getting results in literacy with these first, second, and third graders. We partner with Dr. Nell Duke out of University of Michigan, Dr. Ortiz for basic phonics, early literacy, and what could an older brother, older sister teach a younger brother, younger sister in literacy, in phonics, in fluency, in vocabulary. And so we hope that we have a Erie contingent who are part of our Freedom School Literacy Academy programming this summer and moving forward. We'd love to partner with you all on this. And please, let's make sure we have representation from Erie. We may, I don't want to, please forgive me if someone is there. Our membership has grown substantially, but we hope there's Erie representation in the Pennsylvania Educator Diversity Consortium moving forward as well.
That's an easy pick. Oh, go ahead.
Could I just say, Sharif, could you advise Ken on what Erie would need to become to be your standout regional participant in the Pennsylvania Educator Diversity Consortium?
Well, I think one, that saying, most of the battle is showing up, so that's, that's a big part. But what we're looking for are folks who are problem solvers, who are thinking about how to work together. That African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And we're looking to go far.
Yep.
Ken?
Okay. No, I was just saying it's an easy pivot. So I really appreciate that. And as far as if it was me, I'd be honored to be a part of the consortium. I definitely feel that I could bring some of what we're going through, some of our struggles, some of our strengths that we're having, and really help maybe grow that larger ecosystem from a statewide approach. But as far as with our district, and just hearing you, you caught me. I'm a lifelong learner. Kind of, others would just call you a nerd. I'm sitting here taking notes, as you were talking, and I absolutely, the bonuses, the piece, the toolkits, a lot of what you mentioned, especially the toolkits, and you covered about recruitment and retention and mentorships, because I'm not sitting here as like an expert. I'm sitting here as somebody that has a growth mindset and wants to learn. So I absolutely am open to that. And I'm sure, Mr. Polito mentioned about conversations ongoing. I'm sure he's probably thinking in that line too, is just how can we improve ourselves from a recruitment, from a retention standpoint, and then the mentorship piece. We've done some things internally, but hearing about the ecosystem and hearing about the approaches, and knowing that there is a toolkit that we can just utilize, and then this additional piece where you have this virtual component, and I do feel very strongly that having our students, I feel very strongly about mentorships, period. I think that, and I do a lot of work outside of just diversity. I do a lot around positive behavior interventions and supports, SEL, positive behavior programming, in addition to just diversity. But with that being said, I understand the importance of mentorships. And, when you talk about discipline, especially of Black youth, that mentorships are key instead of discipline, focusing on bringing mentors in and giving them that support and the necessary steps to help them navigate where they're going and what they're dealing with. So there's no doubt, I did mention that we do have some of our high school kids that are working in some of the schools focus on math and some in literacy, but not to the level like you're mentioning. And I think that could be a great partnership. So we're definitely interested in hearing more about it and seeing where it fits with our district as we move forward.
With appreciation to those that are viewing, we're starting to get some nice expressions of strong interest in rising to that opportunity, Sharif, to participate in the Pennsylvania Educator Diversity Consortium. Mr. Gerald Blanks, who's the CEO of the Greater Erie Economic Development Corporation, has grant fundings in the I Believe in Erie program that he'd like to explore, perhaps for use in internships and maybe even the Freedom Schools apprenticeship program. He also, Gerald Blanks, chairs the new Erie County Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission and is interested in exploring closing the gap on the teacher mismatch. I might also say, Sharif and Tanya, you're probably well aware of a great asset, in addition to Mr. Polito up here in Erie. The superintendent of the Mill Creek School District is Dr. Ian Roberts, who is a Black man, very studied in these issues, a scholar, and working hard on recruitment. And if I could be so bold, would be a wonderful asset to engaging with you, Sharif, and Erie Public Schools in a regional ecosystem type approach. Tanya, let me, Sharif, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was just saying, looking forward to it. And I hope you're able to, just follow for everyone in the audience to be able to share the Pennsylvania Educator Diversity Consortium website so they can access these resources, which are available. And I think this is part of it, like, practitioners, folks in the field, in the sector, creating tools based off of feedback and experiences. And, we want people's feedback so that we can continue to improve on these toolkits.
Wonderful. Tanya, thinking about the teacher pipeline, one of the audience members today asked the question with regard to the Pennsylvania state system of higher education. How are they on board with diversification of college teaching staff? So once these efforts of Brian and his team prepare students and get them interested to move on, are they seeing professors who look like them when they go to institutions of higher learning, be they public or private?
Yes, excellent question. So that, to me, the PASHI system is really, I'm a member of the Board of Governors of PASHI, and at almost every Board of Governors meeting, we're given an update on the state of PASHI faculty and staff, by race, ethnicity, and how that compares to the students enrolled at PASHI institutions. They have an incredible dashboard that, they're unapologetically, focused on increasing representation of faculty and staff members and to match the student body. And I have to look up that link, but they come back to that dashboard data on a regular basis, and they really have a great model for focusing on where focus needs to be in terms of that representation. So let me try and look up that link and put it in the chat. But yeah, they stand out as being real about where changes need to happen, and I applaud them for it.
Great. And Tanya, sorry to interrupt, you're looking that up, but a question comes in from Dre Brenneman, who is one of Erie Public Schools directors on the board, with regard to the comment you made earlier in the key interests of the Department of Education, and one of them being around discipline for students and inequities that are ubiquitous across our country and are unfortunately too often the case here in Pennsylvania. Can you speak a little bit to, and then maybe Brian react with regard to that point you made in your presentation about the inequitable profiling or treatment of students of color when it comes to expulsions, to discipline, and even use of police within schools?
Absolutely. I am going to, so that my colleagues in the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, they have been heavily active in the building up of PDE's Equitable Practices Hub. And there's a rich trove of resources on, the disparities that we know exist. I was really, I don't know how to describe it. I was really disturbed a couple of years ago when ProPublica reported on just the disparate treatment of Black male and female high school students in the disciplinary space. And, that reporting really led to a lot of changes in the way in which discipline was meted out. And so I know that my colleagues in the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education have been building out these resources so that, these disparities can cease to exist. And so that's, I need to look that up and I'll provide the link in the chat box on that as well. So I don't have any details on that at the moment, but I will reach out to my colleagues and get back to you on that.
No, thank you. Brian?
Well, we actually do have a pretty strong disparity and inequity here with our a disproportionate number of Black and African American students being disciplined. Is something we called out in our strategic plan back in 2017. Our core stakeholder group felt very strongly that that's something that we should address. And we struggled at the beginning of the implementation of that strategic plan. I think we put the cart before the horse and tried to do that at the building level and had each of our buildings put in goals to help reduce that disparity. And we, over this past year with the pandemic, realized that we needed to take a more systematic approach to that. So one of the things we're doing with our federal stimulus money is really beefing up our student support system. So we're bringing in caseworkers, social workers in all of our buildings. We're adding additional mental health specialists in our buildings. We're expanding our community school model, and we're also rebooting our student assistance program, where we have teams of teachers and support personnel like the guidance counselors, mental health specialists that get together and review data around student behaviors and academics. And the idea here is to really catch those students early on before they get to the discipline phase, and try to get them the supports they need so they get back on track. So we're really in a process right now of building that entire system out, and feel that's going to be the way we're going to be able to approach the disproportionality.
Thank you very much, Brian. These are critical issues, as we see that they're all very much connected. And with the volume of questions that are coming in from the participants today on this webinar on the Zoom platform alone, the number was up to 65 at one point. There's many more on Facebook. Tanya and Sharif, Ken, and Brian, you've sparked a very strong, ongoing, and rising interest in this topic as it relates to our youth, as it relates to our community, as it relates to our economy. And there are more and more expressions among the audience today of interest, including the Erie Community Foundation, Penn State University, working on this issue. So it is apparent that this needs to be an ongoing forum in some fashion. And I'll turn it over to Angela and apologize to the audience of not being able to get to all of the questions, as we're now 1 minute out from our promised adjourn time. So with that, I want to thank you, Brian and Ken, representing Erie Public Schools, and Tanya at the state level for what you do. And Sharif, you're going to be our new best friend up here in Erie. Start planning some road trips. We look forward to hosting you. We have some ideas for how to continue the conversation, and in the immediate near term, enable ongoing questions and suggestions. Angela?
Yes, thank you also from the Jefferson to our panelists today, Mrs. Garcia, Mr. El-Mekki, Mr. Nickson, Mr. Polito. Thank you for sharing your insights and knowledge with us. Really appreciated this webinar, and I hope we can continue this conversation. Thanks to you, Court Gould, for moderating today's lively and thought-provoking conversation. I know we didn't get to every question, but I put it in the chat as well. Please feel free to send me an email with your questions to beaumont@jeserie.org. You can easily find us on the website as well. And I will forward those questions to the panelists. And of course, to all of you watching along, thank you for tuning in. These programs and discussions and the exchange of information and ideas wouldn't be possible without you. For more information about the JES, including how to register for additional events, please visit jeserie.org. And be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For the Jefferson Education Society, I'm Angela Beaumont. Thank you for listening and learning with us. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.